My name is Moyinoluwa Adeyemi. You might know me from the ADS video yesterday. Anyone watched? No? Okay, cool. All right, so today I'll be speaking to you about remote onboarding and how to set your new team members up for success. But before I go on, is it okay if I take a picture of, okay, cool. You know what they say, if you don't have pictures, it never happens. So 1, 2, 3, go. Thank you. All right, so I am a software engineer at Twitter, and I'm the Android tech lead for the search team. And I've had a couple of remote onboarding experiences, both on both sides. I've onboarded someone, and I've been onboarded remotely at different companies, and I thought that this talk would be timely, given the fact that most of us would most likely have had to do this or have done this in the past 1 year. All right, so a brief background. I have 2 remote working experiences. One was planned. So in 2017, I was working remotely from Lagos, Nigeria, for a company that was really distributed. So they had operations in Sub-Saharan Africa, East Africa, and West Africa. And most of the engineering team were spread all over the US and Europe. But I was like the first Nigerian employee, so I had to be remote because I was hired from Nigeria. And then I have a second remote work experience, which was unplanned. So I got into Twitter and moved from Lagos to London. And I was really excited to move here because I've heard great things about the food. And I was really, to be honest, that's the major thing I was looking forward to. And then I got in and the lockdown started. And we had 3 lockdowns after that, and the world is still not back to normal. So 1.5 years later, still never been to the office. I just got to meet some of my colleagues here for the first time today after so long. And I'm sure most of us can relate to this. Oh, they're in front. Hi. Yeah, so in the past 1 year, most times when people are joining a new company, they're just joining a new company. But I had to deal with a new company and then new team and then lockdowns. And, I had to learn a lot through that process. All right, so fast forward a couple of months later, I was settling down at work and everything was going great. And then I was responsible for onboarding someone else to the team. And there's this hashtag, love where you work. I'm sure your companies might have similar ones. And the first thing that struck me was for someone to say they love where they work, right? It actually boils down to the interaction with the team and not necessarily the entire company. So I felt a lot of pressure trying to live up to that. So the question in my head was like, how do I make this person, say, after 3 months, be able to say that they love where they work just based on their interaction with my team? And it was just thinking about all of that gave birth to most of the things I put together for the onboarding process. And then just to ensure that I wasn't just talking from my experience, because I didn't want this talk to be one-sided, because sometimes what works for you may not work for another person, or what works in a big company might not work in at a small company. I decided to put out a tweet just to get a feel for what other people were doing at their companies and to see whether there was some alignment or patterns or themes that I could learn from, or if things were done differently and I was living in a bubble. So I put out this tweet and I got a number of interesting responses. The tweet is still up. If you can find it, you'll see the answers there. So this talk is focused on new people joining new teams. It's not focused on a new team being formed and someone trying to onboard the new team. This talk is based on, let's say, 2 or 1 individual joining a new team, assuming that other members of the team has been in existence and other members are not new. And then this talk is not a recommendation of any practice at any company. It's not promoting any company's practices. It's just like an aggregate of what I saw based on the people I talked to, and I tried to draw common patterns and themes and put them together into this talk. All right, so from all the people I talked to, some onboarding approaches held true in some form. So usually when someone new joins a company, they have to work, right? They have to have work tools. I've seen this happen in different forms. for people who are remote from in entirely different continents where it's like difficult to ship stuff to them, sometimes they might tell them to start with their own devices, and then if you eventually end up meeting, they get the company's laptop. I've seen instances where people said they had to buy the laptop themselves and they got reimbursed by the company. I've seen instances where the company shipped the laptops to them. So depending on whatever works for you, I think the end goal is for the new joiner to have a work tool. And then I've also seen people add, so like instead of just shipping work tools, you also send swag to them. And I'm sure most of us have done this in the past or have seen people do this where, they go on Twitter and they're like, first they're at Microsoft and they have a bunch of Microsoft swag on their desk with the screen with the Microsoft background. I think that kind of adds a personal touch to it and lets the person feel more welcome. I've also seen teams send like fruit baskets and stuff to their teammates. Those are tiny things, but I think that sometimes that goes a long way to show that you're not just thinking about work for the employee, and then you care about them. The next thing that happens is one-on-ones with managers and leads. I'm focusing on managers and leads now because from some of the responses I got, some people said that when they joined, their manager let them know like what the team is doing and how they fit into the big picture. I think at smaller companies, it's easier to feel like you matter and you're doing work that matters and your contributions are going to be used. But sometimes at larger companies, you might just feel like one extra headcount, without knowing the impact of your work. So I feel like the first set of one-on-ones is just to enlighten the person and let them see their role within the company and how they fit and how their contributions, are going to make an impact. So things like the team mission, the roadmap, and all of that should be discussed during these meetings. And then there's a checklist. A couple of people mentioned checklists. I've had to create this too in the past, which is just like a document containing things that the new joiner should know, and be able to use when they join. So it doesn't have to be like super technical. It can just be things like, here's how we create PRs. Here's what our code review process looks like. Here's what CI/CD is. Here's how we run our app. Here's how we test. So just highlighting these different things. And I found that everybody struggles with this part, no matter how experienced you are. And it doesn't mean like that people are dumb. It just means that it's a new process that they need to learn. And I think sometimes having all this documented is useful so that you don't keep going over the same things. And then sometimes people can have reference points if they have questions and they don't have to come to you with the same questions all the time. Yeah, one other thing I've seen done is announcements. So sometimes in a small company, it can be like an email to the entire company, or if it's a Slack group, just an announcement telling people who the new person is, a bit of their background, and then maybe some fun information, whatever you like fun sports, things they do outside of work, could be anything. And then virtual coffee with the rest of the team. So I think sometimes this goes both ways. So if you have time, like if you're the person onboarding the new person and you have some time, you can decide, you definitely know the people that the new person should be able to talk to, both within and outside the team. So if you have some time, you can go a step further to set up those meetings with them, like ping all the new people on their behalf and set up the meetings. But if you don't have time, you can just maybe compile a list and then tell the person to reach out to people. I know that if someone comes to me and says they're new and they want a one-on-one, I'm like, sure, just pick any time on my calendar. And I'm sure that that's the same for most people. So, but I think it's important that people get to meet other people. And usually this should not be like a formal talk, not like the one-on-ones with the managers. This should just be what would happen if you went, so imagine you went to lunch with a new colleague. You will most likely not talk about work. You will talk about the weather, of course, well, hello, London. Talk about the weather, talk about different stuff. So I think this kind of helps the new person see you outside of the work environment and just like get comfortable with working with you. And then depending on the company, we might have different new people join. Let's say like there are 5 teams and then there are 5 new people joining each of those teams, 1 person on each team. Some companies might have group remote onboarding programs for everybody to attend. I think some people call that boot camp, where you have to go through a series of processes at the same time. So this varies per company, but depending on what setup there is at your company, you might want to offer this to new people too. All right, so there are a bunch of challenges that comes with working remotely. I'm sure if I go around asking, most of you would probably name some of the things in this slides. But based on the questions I asked and from personal experience and just from talking with people, I just highlighted 4 of them. And I'm going to talk very briefly about them. This is just 20 minutes talk. And hopefully it will be able to resonate, or like you have answers to some questions you may have had. All right, so the first one is like uncertainty around expectations. So sometimes people, because you're not together in the same place, it's hard for some people to know if they're doing the right things, if they're hitting the right targets, if they're doing a good job. And this happens across all engineering levels. And like this is a huge problem that I've seen some people report, and hopefully I'm going to share some solutions to that. Another major one is time to contribute. This is more of a problem for junior engineers than it is for senior. I think the higher you go, the easier it is. Not necessarily because you know all the processes, but just because you must have had some experience, fighting this kind of battles and knowing how to look for answers, and even knowing when to ask questions, because I think that that's also important. I think the more junior a person is, the less they know what they should know and what they should not know, and they'll most likely not be eager to ask questions, unlike someone who's senior who knows when to reach out and when to give up struggling. And I think this is, the remote world is, I've heard feedback that this is really affecting junior engineers because companies find it easier to onboard remote senior engineers faster than juniors. Another big one is feeling disconnected. So there's someone I spoke to who said her team is based in London and she was based in Paris, and there was some personality differences. I've seen people just hop on random calls just to talk because there's a feeling of disconnection. And I'm sure we can all relate to it. We've all been through 1 year of the pandemic, so this shouldn't be a strange issue. And then the last one is time zone differences. So I know that the remote world is opening up the job market to people in other parts of the world. So now it's not unlikely to find someone who is in the EU working for a company in the US. And with that, you definitely have to deal with time zone differences, even within the same company sometimes. And I think that it's important to know how to manage this and how to set the expectations, because you won't expect, it's reasonable maybe to expect someone to stay up late for a bit, but if someone continues doing this, then they'll most likely burn out if they have to keep working outside of their time zones. All right, so I'm just going to briefly talk about the solutions that I've also heard. This is not a recommendation, but what I think can be done to these problems. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Your mileage may vary, so I think just do whatever you think works best for your particular scenario. So for uncertainty around expectations, I found that having clear set of defined goals helps people know what they need to do. So if you say create a document, let's say the checklist, for example, that has your 30-day goals, 60-day goals, 90-day goals, and it's written clearly and stated what you expect the new joiner to have done after each of this period, I think it's easy for both the person onboarding and then the person onboarding that person, or even the team, to kind of know if they're on track. And this would probably eliminate the questions of, the uncertainty around expectations. And then regular check-ins are also helpful. So don't bring someone new into the team and then leave them for 2 months and then give them feedback that they are not, doing the right thing. I feel like regular check-ins are very proper every day, multiple times a day, but it should also not be too much that you don't feel like you're micromanaging them, but just making them comfortable enough to know that you're there to help them through any problems. And I think that this duration should increase the lower level a person is. Senior engineers might not need so much check-ins, and I expect that if you're senior, you should know when to reach out. So if you have issues, don't wait for someone to check in with you. But the more junior a person is, then the more regular the cadence should be. And then one thing I found helpful is that at the end of the day, like if you have the documents, once you have, if you say like after 90 days, if you've done this, then you've onboarded successfully, you should make that new person give you feedback on that process so that it's a lot better for the next person who has to join the team. And then next is time to contribute. For this, I found that, at least from my personal experiences at both remote jobs, and based on feedback from people too, having an onboarding buddy is really helpful. I think everyone would like one particular person to ask all their questions, because it can be daunting, being added to a Slack group of 500 people, and then you're like, I'm not sure I should ask this question. But if there's someone you know that their work is to listen to you and you can always DM and no question is too stupid, then you might feel comfortable asking for help. And I think this is very important for juniors, because maybe seniors might have had the experience and know when to reach out, but sometimes it can feel intimidating for more junior people. And then lots of peer programming. This also varies. So I don't know, sometimes the culture at the company might encourage peer programming, sometimes it might not. But I feel like if you're bringing on a junior person, then you most likely have to spend a lot of time with them. Just setting up Android Studio based on your company's configurations is enough in your headache for one person sometimes. The more senior you are, you might have fought battles with Android Studio and won, and based on that experience, be able to navigate things faster. But yeah, I think just look at the situation and figure out what works for you. And then the third problem, feeling disconnected. So for this, I found that sometimes going out of your way to make the person feel welcome helps. So a lot of informal team time with the rest of the team, the team meetings I mentioned earlier, the virtual coffees, and this might not, I found that sometimes this might cut across organizations. So for me, I have random coffees with people on my team, and then I have random coffees with people from like the broader Android group. Some of them might not be on my team. And then just, finding different groups to connect people with, because sometimes you don't know, since it's harder to bump into people, I found that random coffees really help, because then you can't predict who you get matched with, and, you might learn something interesting about someone else on another team. And even if it's just like learning what the process on the other team is like, or just meeting someone new, that really helps. Because these days you can't, randomly bump into someone on your way to lunch, or all the opportunities that physical offices have granted us are not possible. So there are a bunch of different ideas for things to do. I know teams that have done like virtual Among Us games. I know people that have done pasta making together. They got on a call with an instructor, they bought the flour and eggs, and they just made pasta. I know people who have painted together or done pottery, and I think that these things are important, because sometimes you feel like all you do is work with your team, and it helps to just have these bonding experiences with them outside of work. And then the last is time zone differences. So this is a very tricky one. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. I gave them the same levels because your mileage might vary. So I feel like even if we're all going async, sometimes it's good to have some window of opportunity for FaceTime. And this depends on what time zone everyone is. Sometimes you might not be able to catch everyone together, depending on how distributed your company is. You might not be able to catch everyone together in one time zone. But I feel like if there's, say, someone working in New York or SF, and then you're in London, there's a small 2-hour, 3-hour window from like 4 p.m. BST to about 6, which is like 9 a.m. SF time, that you can decide you're both going to be online, and then if you're going to have any virtual meetings, all those meetings should be within that time. And then it becomes even trickier if someone is in the US, and then someone is in London, and then someone is in Singapore. Because it's like one person is going to sleep, one person is waking up, and then it's the end of someone's day. So for that, you might decide to rotate it and say, okay, we have FaceTime between Singapore and the US, but we'll take notes for the person in London, and then just rotate it so that it doesn't feel like one person or some group of people are left out. For recorded meetings, this also helps. So if there are meetings that are just like status updates that the person isn't necessarily going to contribute to, you can have the meeting, record it and then share the videos with them, just so that they don't have to stay up late to attend. Meeting notes also help. Sometimes you can decide to forego the virtual meeting and then just write up stuff in a doc, and people can leave documents. This is really good for meetings that are just status updates, where it's like stand-up or some weekly catch-up on the project. And it helps to write everything so that everyone, no matter their time zone, can always get back and be up to date. And then short feedback cycles. This one has personally affected me. So if you have people in different time zones and let's say you're working with someone in SF and then you're both working on the same project and you need to review your code, I think it's great that you prioritize their work so that by the start of their day, they already have feedback from you. Because if you don't get to it during your work day, then it means that they have to wait another 24 hours before they can make progress. And this applies to both time zones. So it would be great if you prioritize their work once you start so that they can continue work by the start of their day and nobody's blocked. So yeah, that was everything I had. 4 problems, 4 solutions. Any questions? Yes, please.
So yeah. So my question is, I've been doing remote working for 8 years, give or take, and I found oftentimes people not committing as much as they would to their work if they were in an office. So how would you deal with that? You said short feedback cycles, and I really focus on pull requests and things like that. But how did you solve that?
I think setting expectations work here. Generally, the teams I work with are very open and they trust each other. Like, if you commit to something and you can't meet it, I expect you to tell me that this is up. Not necessarily because I want you to do the work at all costs, but just so that I understand that something is happening and you can't meet up. So I think building a culture of trust within your team and expecting that you don't have to chase people to give you updates, that should help, because you can't micromanage people or put trackers on their devices to know when they're online and stuff. So I think just getting people to, setting expectations for people and then letting them understand that you expect them to meet it, but also be very open if something comes up and you can't achieve that goal.
Cool, thank
you. More questions? No? All right, thank you. Oh, okay.
Hi, I wanted to ask, so you spoke a lot about encouraging coffee time with new people or existing people. They seem like one-on-one conversations. Have you any tips on how to handle those kind of, the social conversations you want to have, like a brief social with people, but the whole team is involved? Because often you can have different personalities where some people really kind of talk a lot and they speak up a lot, and some people who don't, they're more listeners and like to listen a lot. And on the video call, it's quite hard to, there's only one thread of conversation, whereas obviously one-on-one or in a room, you can kind of move off, have a conversation, come back.
Yeah, so for group activities, sometimes it might be better to do an activity and have the conversation on the side. I remember that I joined an escape room with a bunch of people, and we had to chat, but we weren't really chatting about social stuff. We're trying to solve the problem. So we had to talk and communicate. And I think that sometimes just playing games with people tells you a lot about them. So it doesn't necessarily have to be everybody in the room looking for the awkward silence and looking for who to say all the icebreakers and stuff. It can just be group activities that would let you know more about them. And I think if you are not focused on, if the pressure is off you meeting socially and you're focused on an activity, then it might be a lot easier.
Nice. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. If you have more questions, I am on the internet at Moye.